pollination, the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma is called as pollination, and pollination is a prerequisite for fertilization. And pollination is a characteristic feature that is observed in the phanerogams, particularly where siphonogamy is present, that is the male gametes are non-motile, and pollen grains are also non-motile, which are carried from anther to the stigma with the help of some external agents. Sometimes in self-pollination there is no need of external agents also. So, like here pollination is generally been observed in gymnosperm plants and in angiosperms. In gymnosperms, ovules are naked, that is the ovules are not enclosed by the ovary wall. That is the reason why the pollen grains will directly reach the micropyle of the ovule. So, as they are coming directly, so we call it as direct type of pollination. Whereas in the angiosperms, as we know that the style, ovary and stigma. So, here ovules are present inside the ovary, whereas the pollen grains will reach the stigma. When they reach the stigma, because of the interaction between the stigma and the pollen grains will germinate and the male gametes are gradually passing through the pollen tube and enter into the ovule. So, that is the reason why we call this as a indirect type of pollination. So, this is a variation that we find between the pollination of gymnosperms and the angiosperms based on the absence and presence of the ovary in them. Then coming to the types of pollination. In flowering plants, there are two types of pollinations basically. One is called as self-pollination and other is called as cross-pollination. First, let us come to the self-pollination process. Self-pollination is otherwise called as autogamy. In the self-pollination, the pollen grains are transferred from anther to the stigma of the same flower. So, as we are saying that the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower, such that the primary condition for self-pollination is the flowers should be bisexual. This is a primary condition that should be there in a self-pollinated flowers. And other characters that are required for self-pollination is the synchrony should be there. Synchrony should be there between the maturity period of the andrecium and the gynoecium, and both the sex organs, that is both the stamens and carpels should be of same height and they should be at reachable levels. So, these are the conditions which are required for self-pollination, and of course, one more is that is synchrony, means the maturity time between the andrecium and gynoecium should be nearly same. So, these are the primary requirements for self-pollination in a flower. But out of these, the most important one should be the bisexual condition. So, here there are some conditions where the flowers are sometimes remain closed throughout their life, and in most of the cases the flowers are open. Based on that one, cleistogamous flowers are there and chasmogamous flowers are there. Cleistogamous flowers means the flowers which never open are called as, that means they always remain closed. Such type of flowers are called as cleistogamous flowers, and the type of pollination which is taking place in these flowers is called as cleistogamy. Cleisto means closed or which will not open. So, the pollination which is taking place in the cleistogamous flowers is called as cleistogamy. This type of character can be seen in many examples like in oxalis, commalina and viola like plants. So, these are the examples where cleistogamous flowers are present. And as the flowers which never open, what happens is the androecium and gynoecium, both of them are enclosed, so that whenever the androecium matures or whenever the stamen get matured, they will release the pollen grains, and those pollen grains will fall on the stigma of the same flower, and the germination of the pollen grains will also be taking place. That's the reason why we call this as a cleistogamy in the cleistogamous flowers. Whereas when it's coming to chasmogamous flowers, in the chasmogamous flowers, so actually the meaning of this one is the flowers which will open or which are blooming, so that the androecium and gynoecium are exposed to the environment. In chasmogamous flowers, there is an equal chance of self-pollination and also cross-pollination. So in these chasmogamous flowers, the synchrony should be there between the maturity period of both the androecium and the gynoecium, and the androecium and gynoecium should be at the same level, so that they should be reachable form, so that the androecium can release the pollen grains which can be accepted easily by the stigmatic surface of the carpels. So this type of character can also be seen in as I said, the chasmogamous flowers will exhibit either self-pollination or the cross-pollination process. In self-pollination, no need of external agents. Actually, what do you mean by these external agents means? There are some agents or some vector-like structures which will help in the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma. So as as their self-pollination is taking place, no need of the transfer of pollen grains from to the long distance, so that no need of external agents also. So in absence of external agents also, assured seed set is present in the self-pollination process. So that is the one significance related to the self-pollination, where in absence of external agents also, the seed set is taking place. Then coming to the next one is cross-pollination. Cross-pollination means the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of different flowers. They may be present on the same plant or on the different plant. If they are present on different plant, they should belong to the same species. So that is a primary requirement in the cross-pollination. And one more thing. So here the cross-pollination either may occur in bisexual flowers or in the unisexual flowers. So one more thing, that based on the nature or based on which type based on the type of flowers in which the pollination is taking place. So here cross pollination can be considered to be the two types. One is gytenogamy and other is called as xenogamy. Let's come to first one. Okay. In gytenogamy, the pollen grains are transferred from anthers of one flower to the stigma of the other flower, which are present on the same plant. That is the two flowered pollination, we call it as. Two flowers are taking part, but here the two flowers are present on the same plant. So that the two flowers which are participating here are genetically similar. That's the reason why we call gytenogamy as physiologically or physically, we can say. Physically they are different, flowers are different, but genetically they are similar. So this type of actually some as the two flowers are genetically similar, so it is nearly similar like that of self-pollination process. But as the two flowers are participating, so that is the only reason where we are considering gytenogamy as a cross-pollination process. So this is called as two-flowered and single plant pollination process. The next one is xenogamy. Xenogamy is the type of cross-pollination where two flowers will participate. These two flowers are present on two different plants, but the two plants should belong to the same species. So that is simply to say the pollination between two flowers which are present on two different plants belonging to same species, that process is called as xenogamy condition. Here, as the two flowers are participating which are present on two different plants, they are genetically different from each other. So that is physically and also genetically there is a variation or difference in the flowers which are participating in the xenogamy. So here it is considered to be the two flowered and two plant pollination, whereas geitonogamy two flowered but single parent pollination. So it is purely considered to be the cross pollination process, because the flowers, two different flowers are participating, and the two flowers which are participating in the pollination are genetically are different. So that's the reason it is considered to be the pure form of a cross pollination process.